My name is John Mendez, and I am your host. Welcome to Walk to Wealth, where I motivate and inspire people new to the world of personal finance by letting you all in behind the scenes of someone who's still on his way. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do us one teeny tiny favor. If you could just refer us to a friend. If you find any value in this episode or any of the episodes that you listen to, if you find any bit of value, share that with a friend so we can keep on impacting lives. Without further ado, we have a super duper very special guest with me today, Julia. For anyone that may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, who are you? What's your elevator pitch? What do you do?
Julia Lashay Israel. I'm the head of inclusion Keller Williams Realty International. What do I do? Honestly, my job is really just to make Keller Williams, all of our 800 market centers, the most inclusive places where anybody can come into our organization and say, you know what, this is for me, this is a place where I can thrive. That's the goal. And also to help educate people about how to grow their businesses through diversity. I am a licensed realtor. I have been a licensed realtor for 22 years now. And I also have a team in Minneapolis. So real estate is something that is important to me. People are important to me, which is why I do this diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I'm super happy to be here on your podcast today.
Julia, I'm super glad that, you agreed to hop onto the show. Julia, before, all the success, before the, speaking on big stages and making an impact on tons and tons of people's lives, where does this story take place? Tell us a little bit about your walk to wealth.
All right. Well, I love that you call it Walk to Wealth, first of all. And as we were just sharing before we went live, for me, wealth means a number of different things. Most people think of it as a monetary journey, right? As financially fit, if you will, whatever that means, financial success. That's different for everybody too. Wealth could also mean just your health, because your health is a big part of wealth. So that question in general, the walk to wealth on my journey, I suppose, it started, I started at 18. I was licensed at 18. Real estate's all I've ever done. And that journey went on to do real estate in itself has provided a number of opportunities for me. I've been a sales agent. I've been an office manager. I've been a broker. I've been a productivity coach. I've been a coach otherwise. I've been a recruiter. I've been all kinds of different things. Obviously an investor, homeowner, those types of things have really led to a fruitful, life. And if I were to call it success, you say your journey to success, I would call success really was just the opportunity to spend time with the people I wanted to spend time to, doing the things I wanted to do because I had the money to do it, because that's the opportunity real estate provided for me. And what I've understood more than anything, wealth to me right now means health. Because without it and without taking care of yourself, and if you're not healthy, you're not doing anything. And trust me, I've been down on my back with COVID for the last week. You're not doing anything, you're not making any money if you're not healthy.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, I'm glad that you brought up health, because I feel like now and more than ever, like with hustle culture and, the rise of entrepreneurship, because we live in a time where it's, easy as it's ever been to start a business, to, do e-commerce, to get into drop shipping or whatever route, and like you get, so especially when you start getting some traction, you get so, heavily invested in some of these things. The first thing that usually flies out the window is always your health. Mm-hmm. You get busy, stop going to the gym. You stop doing your morning routine. You stop stretching. You start sleeping later. The first thing that usually goes out the window, me included, is health. And a lot of us tend to, forget about that very, very important aspect, because no matter, how much money you have, you can only buy, such a high quality. Yeah, you can't buy health, and it's only so much medicine can do after a certain point in time, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got into this at 18, which is extremely young. I thought I got into this early. I got into this the day after I turned, 2 weeks after I turned 19. But, did you always kind of have your head strapped onto your shoulder in terms of like, this is exactly what I need to do? Like, did you have your mission set from early on? Or this is just something that you kind of had a feeling for and it was like, let me run with it. And then along the way, kind of, narrowed out and figured out exactly your purpose. How did that work?
Well, entrepreneurship, I've always been a fan of entrepreneurship. Even in high school, I was a fan of doing it my way. Like, I know y'all got your little way that you say we should do it. I'm going to do it my way, right? So I've always been a fan of entrepreneurship. That's just my jam, you know. And so to have an opportunity to do that, I always, what I knew I didn't want to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. That was stupid to me. Like, why are people waking up so early? This is ridiculous. I hate waking up. I still don't like waking up. I'm not a morning person. I'm just not. And this was a career where I could not start my day until a little bit later, and it would still be successful. So some of those types of things were kind of what paved the way. But I always knew I wanted to do that. And then early on, of course, I knew I wanted to go into real estate. And moreover, what it evolved into is really, like you said, a mission to really help build up people and help people become successful through real estate. Initially, of course, it was consumers, helping people get into home ownership and acquire real estate and build an amazing big life that way. And then it evolved into me training and coaching real estate professionals. And then it evolved into helping business owners and market centers and operating partners and things of that nature really grow their businesses all through real estate. And my mission still is of that. I love two things. I love real estate and real estate professionals. And the goal is to help people build big, amazing lives through the power of entrepreneurship and real estate. And so that's really what my passion is, my mission is, and my focus is. And that's really what the journey has been about. And that's exactly what a mission is. It's an everlasting journey. Different than a goal, of course, as you've learned. Where a goal is something you can accomplish in one lifetime. For me, this work of helping people build those amazing lives is, in fact, a mission. It's something that I can dedicate my entire life to and never be done. You know.
So yeah, and that's an amazing. I feel like a lot of people, it's hard to kind of distinguish the difference between the two, because no one talks about these things in terms of what a goal is. Everyone sees goals, and I've now learned goals are just kind of checkpoints along the way towards that grander mission. But there was one person I seen on the Facebook Live, I think, or some video somewhere, and it was like, if you can accomplish what you want in your own lifetime, you're not thinking big enough, right? You actually don't have a mission. And so I started thinking, and I was fortunate enough to go to Quantum Leap. For anyone that may not know, who is not affiliated with Keller Williams, Quantum Leap is pretty much a curriculum kind of taught by instructors and created from Gary Keller and the lessons he's learned. And from there, I was kind of able to kind of craft my own like personal mission statement. Mm-hmm. Did you have something like that, Quantum Leap, when you got started, or did you kind of like craft it out of your experiences along the way, DIY style?
I didn't learn about Quantum Leap until much later in my career. And if I could do anything differently, I would have joined Keller Williams sooner, because I was not with Keller Williams when I was 18, and I didn't have all the training and tools and resources and things that people know about now. So I never was introduced to Quantum Leap probably until 2008, 2010 maybe. And I wish I would have known that, because it really gives a lot of direction, in what your purpose is, and really the purpose in your walk to wealth, if you will, so that you don't get off track. I think the value of it, having a mission, like you said, you created your mission statement. The value of having a mission statement is simply that you can understand. It basically helps guide your decisions for you along the way. You talk about being burnt out, the hustle. What did you call it? Yeah,
hustle culture. Hustle culture.
Young people use. What'd you call it?
Hustle culture.
Yeah. The hustle culture. And I was the president of the hustle culture club. Like, I'm like, don't stop. Go till you drop. When you drop, roll back over. Step back up. Keep going. Don't sleep till November. That was me. And but if you really have a mission, it gives you an opportunity to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not in alignment with what I'm about or my purpose is about. And you can really organize your time so you don't have to be like that. You don't have to live like that, because that's not living. So that's what I would say. I wish we had something like that. We did not have something like that. But if you have a purpose, it's really your purpose, right? If you understand your life's purpose, your mission, it eliminates the need to do a lot of that, because you're really structured in your decision making.
Yeah, and we're fortunate to have a company that provides this training and provides this way of thinking to us, and this makes it very accessible. But for a lot of people that may not even be in real estate at all, and maybe in another industry, or maybe at in some point in their life where they might not even be thinking about entrepreneurship, a lot of these thoughts can come off as like grand ideas, like I'm young. I'm just like, what on earth do I know about life and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So it's like, how could someone kind of get started in terms of kind of crafting this personal mission statement? I genuinely feel like it's been able to help propel me a lot, further and a lot quicker. Not that it's a race, but as you said, you know what what doesn't align with you. And so how could someone kind of get started creating this mission statement? Because for a lot of people, it may seem like something super overwhelming.
Yeah, you're right, and it's a good point. This is not exclusive to real estate in any way, shape, or form, or entrepreneurship. Everybody was put on earth for a purpose. There is something that every single person was designed to do that nobody else can do. You can't do it. I can't do it. No one can do it, right? Only them. And so it doesn't really have anything to do with entrepreneurship or even business at all. It has to do with life and how you live your life. And so the easiest way to like not make it seem like a grandiose idea is just first identify what you feel like you're connected to, right? What topics are you really drawn to? Normally, it's kind of like when something irritates the crap out of you about how somebody's doing something, because it's like, that's probably because you're the person who's supposed to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere they're like, every time we go here, this is the most disorganized place. And maybe it's because you're the organizer, and so just identifying what bothers you is normally what you're supposed to be doing, and really thinking about like, what could I do to create just a positive ripple in the world, But first, identifying what is that thing that that really gives you energy and that you feel connected to. Everybody has something, that you feel connected to. That's simple. That's the first step. That's step one. And then step two is you also have a gift. Everyone has a gift. I used to think, I'll never forget being, for a long time, all the way through high school, I always felt like, oh, I wish I could sing. I wish I could dance. I wish I could play an instrument. I don't have any gifts. Your gifts may not be artistic in that way, but your gifts, I always had the gift of gab, I was always the loudest person in the room. Now people pay me for it, So I'm covering what is your gift? What is unique to you that you're really good at doing? Or maybe, you get caught up doing something for so long and you lose track of time. What is that thing that you're doing that you're losing track of time because you like doing it so much? Or you would do it for free. I would say, this work I do, I would do it for free. I'm so glad they pay me, right? But if they didn't, I would find a way to get paid doing something else and do this for free. What is that, right? That's step two. What is your unique gift that you have? And then once you identify those things, what do I like? What am I connected to? What's my gift? What are the talents that I possess? You can start just drafting then, what does that mean for your life? What is we call it a big why, right? Sometimes. What is your mission? And it has nothing to do with age even. Sometimes I have 12-year-olds write down what they think they like to do and what they're gifted at and what their mission might be. Of course, it can change. It's always going to probably change and evolve, and it certainly doesn't have to be perfect. But and then you can just kind of start to draft, what am I about? And you simply start by, my mission in life is to do what? How are you going to do that? And then tweak it, along the way.
Yeah, that's amazing, because that's exactly what I did when I kind of had the workshop to create my own personal mission statement. I ended up drafting the mission statement. My mission in life is to enlighten the unenlightened by helping people build wealth and think abundantly. The first part comes from a quote that, as many of my listeners know, that I got from my English teacher, who would go into random off-curriculum philosophical classes and ideas and lectures. And I don't remember anything that he mentioned besides that one quote. Somehow, for some reason, it stuck with me. And and then I kind of drafted into the mission statement. But to kind of backtrack back to step one, in a joking way, what you're saying is that if my sister bothers me, then my mission in life, in a way, is to help my sister, because she's been getting on my nerves a lot recently. And so I don't know if I'm supposed to gravitate towards her, so this is some way of telling me like I need to go help. But Mac, on a more serious note, that first step, I think one thing that I did is I have a very unconventional way of thinking about things, where I didn't really know, at least growing up, what I liked. I just knew what I didn't like, and because I'd never had a proper role model in my life to look up to or look after to try to follow in their footsteps. So I kind of just grew up in a way where I would take everyone at face value, try to take the things that I like and incorporate into me and what I was doing, and leave out the parts that I didn't like. And that's how I kind of went about. And so I love that you said find things that you're connected to. But if, that may be too difficult, I feel like, as you said, everyone knows what what bothers them. Everyone knows what they don't like. And it's obvious because your body will tell you. It's either you're going to get annoyed, if you touch, if you're in a situation where the energy isn't, what you're trying to give out, you're going to feel like less of yourself. You're going to feel like out of it or out of the zone. And so then back to the gifts part, I think I wanted to, stop right there for a little bit, because a lot of people have like limiting beliefs. As you know, a lot of people are also willfully blind, and they'll have their gifts, and they'll intentionally not look at the gifts that's right there. Because it's easier because if you have a gift, then you have a responsibility. So it's a lot easier to just look the other way and turn the cheek, because you don't want to adopt that responsibility. So what advice can you have for anyone like with like limiting beliefs, or like that are like either willfully blind and either not looking at their gifts, or just constantly in a state of like discrediting themselves, or like imposter syndrome?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that was the word. Somebody asked me about imposter syndrome, and I think, actually I'll spin off on that too with the unique gift thing. There is a space for you somewhere and your gift, whether you realize you have one or not. Like I said, I went a very long time into adulthood thinking like I'm not good at anything, and I was good at organizing. I was good at. I don't like disorder. If you walk into an organization or something like that and it's not orderly, it bothers me. That's not how this should run. And so those types of things irritated me. And so I would take control and manage them, if you will, and become an office manager. But everybody is uniquely gifted to do something. And again, it's whatever you maybe do by yourself in your room that just brings you a little bit of joy. That's your gift, and in no way, shape, or form should you alter that or yourself to be someone other than who you are, and be someone other than your uniqueness. There was a young lady last week that asked me about imposter syndrome. And the interesting thing about her asking about that was, I think she asked me, do I ever experience that in some of the rooms that I'm in? And my answer was no. Being who I am has paved the way for the opportunities that I have. Being who I am, and I even just had a situation where somebody in one of our market centers, our offices, fired somebody for having braids, and so that person was, prior to being fired, feeling like they needed to change themselves. They asked them to cut their hair. They asked them to do, to fit in to you should never strive to fit in. Like if I like that saying, go where you are celebrated, not where you're tolerated. So imposter syndrome is something that I just don't understand. Everyone is unique on purpose, right? People are built differently on purpose. There are some things that I'm really, really good at. Like people used to make fun of the way that I talked all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you sound like a white girl. Oh, your voice is too deep. Oh, da, da, da. All of those things. And now, sometimes people pay me $8,000 to $10,000 I skip all the way to the bank. Me and my big mouth and white girl sound So the joke is on them, right? Everybody has something unique. And that was really something that I used to hide. You talk about gifts. I used to feel like, I talk funny, or I'm too loud, or I'm, and that's the very thing that pays me the most is to talk.
Yeah.
So everybody has a very uniqueness about them for a reason. It's connected to your purpose.
Yeah. It's funny how the world plays out in that way. Things that you never would have thought end up being things that help you flourish and like go to that next level. I think I had a similar experience, kind of where I was at an internship, and like I had braids for my prom. If you see my prom photos, I think the braids were worth it because I did my thing for prom. But and pretty much there was a day before prom that we all had off, because it was in high school at that time. But the day before that, I was just going to come in with braids, and they pretty much was like, it's okay. You could take that day off as well. And I was just confused. But as I said, I never grew up with role models. So one thing I always did was like, I knew song lyrics like the back of my hand. I would So like one of my favorite song lyrics is like, you don't worry about fitting in when you're custom made.
Right. Yeah.
So and I kind of had to, really adopt that because like I feel like for the most part that might be like the only time where I noticed something was off. Then I might just either be ignorant to it or just so stuck in my like hyper optimistic ways that it's like no matter what gets thrown at me, it's like, throw it at me, I step over it. But like for me, I feel that not really having much, I just knew I wanted to push away, and people always said they seen something in me, and it took me a while to like see it as well. But it's like, one thing my OP always said is like, to just everyone in general, is like, if you don't have enough confidence to go on a listing appointment, here, borrow some of mine. And it's like, it kind of like borrowing and relying on the confidence of others until you kind of can get your own is a great way to go about it as well. And I know you kind of mentioned a little bit, but you were able to climb the ranks in different avenues. And at any points of those times, I know you said that, you didn't have imposter syndrome, but like at any point in those times, maybe when you were outside of the room, maybe, behind closed door, did it ever creep into your mind, the idea of like, hey, maybe this is overwhelming, or hey, sheesh, this is a lot, maybe even not imposter syndrome, but like even if it's just doubt in general about like it all working out.
And fear and doubt and,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a feeling of inadequacy or whatever that might be. I think everyone experiences that. And I'll never forget the first time I emceed an event. A friend of mine was hosting this big event, some women's empowerment thing, and she asked me if I would be the MC. I had never done that before. I've never publicly spoken before, and I agreed to do it. But I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm really scared. I'm afraid. Is what I said. And she said, "Great, do it afraid." And I've always just done that. I've done it afraid. I do it afraid. I do it afraid. I do it afraid. Until eventually you do it enough that fear wears off, and it's something that is just become second nature. But yeah, you might feel inadequate. Do it anyway. The first time I was on a board, I remember walking into the room, and the board, there were no women there at all. Certainly no Black people. And I was definitely the youngest person in the room. And I was like 35 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They were all like over 50, over 60 white men, And I called my OP at the time. I was actually taking his seat on the board. And I called him from the bathroom. And I said, "Oh my God, everybody here is an old white man." And he said, "Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm an old white man." I said, "I know, that's what I'm calling you." You're like, "Right, what am I supposed to do?" And he was like, "What do you mean, what are you supposed to do?" I was like, "I don't know what to do. I'm like, I'm the only person here." And he said, "Well, are they hurting you?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Well, then go sit down and eat like everybody else. You belong there." And I just always walk into a room like, "Of course I belong here. I'm here, you're here, we're here, hey, we're here, and I
Mm-hmm.
belong there." So that is something that I always have felt like if I am in here, it's because I belong here, and you just kind of have to, that isn't a mature thing to grow into, but thinking along the way that even if you don't know what's going on, I've served on some boards and some committees that I have zero idea what these people are talking about. So over my head. But also, I subscribe to the vote law that people grow into the conversations around them. So I sit there and try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like eventually I'm gonna figure out what's going on here. But that's how you learn. I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I always want to be in a room like that. I intentionally find rooms like that to sit in, where I have no idea what they're talking about. Eventually it'll rub off. Like at our headquarters, walking around with millionaires, multi-millionaires all day long. Where y'all going? Me too. What meeting is this? Me too. I go in every room. Eventually, it's gonna rub off.
Yeah, something's gonna
I
stick.
too will be a multi-millionaire by the end of the year because how could I not? I'm in this room and we're together and I'm doing whatever you're doing. I'm saying whatever you're saying. And it's not. And I belong here. I feel confident that this is a place where I belong because of my unique skills. That's why I don't believe in the imposter syndrome, because I'm here because of the uniqueness that I bring to this conversation, not because I'm you. I can't be you. I don't want to be you. You should want to be me because I'm great, But that's kind of the ideology that I act from, even when you do feel intimidated or insecure or whatever that might be. Is you do belong there. Something about you is unique enough that you are there for that reason. You might not know what it is, but you are. So I walk in that authority.
Yeah. How important was, I know everyone knows the quote, that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. And, and the other one that I love too is if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So like, how in your journey did you always make an emphasis, I guess you could say, to hop into these rooms where, you're not the smartest person in the room and network and go to events, did you go to that growing in?
Sometimes I would accidentally end up there and be like, okay, what, and whatever. I'm gonna just learn what I can, and find somebody who I aspire, to be like, and do the things they do, and go places they go, and still be myself. So it's not always been intentional. A lot of times it's accidental, where you just end up someplace where you didn't really mean to be. Like when I entered in the room where they were talking way over my head, I didn't mean to be there. Somebody invited me, right? Like, and somebody
Yeah.
come to the meeting, and I was like, oh my gosh. But I didn't always do it. Now I do it on purpose because I know what I've learned by accidentally being in those situations. And most of the things you learn, you don't learn in the book. You learn from your experiences. So
Yeah.
I go now on purpose, but before it was just accidental.
Yeah. And so what advice would you get, I guess, would you give to yourself? What have you, like, if you could go back in time, would you have like actively seeked out some of these people, or, would you have just kind of about it the way you think? Because I'm always like, if I could change something, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at. So, but like,
Exactly,
if you could change something, would you, or would you have played out the way it is?
People ask that a lot. Like, what's the one thing you would change? I would actually say the people that you surround yourself with, because there have been people in my life that put me back at ground zero, just by some, particularly as women, as young girls are easily influenced by these boys, and they're not always the right boys. So I think, if anything, there are certain people that I wouldn't have allowed to connect with, and I wouldn't have allowed them in my space, and to contaminate my space, if you will. So even when you talk about wealth, we talked about health. Some of that health sometimes is mental health, not being around people who are supportive. Being around negative people. There's one of those things that I like, that if the 5 people around you, or 5 people in your circle, are holding you down or whatever, it's not a circle, it's a cage. Whatever that saying is about the people but that's basically my point, is if you are around people who are not encouraging you and uplifting you, and your circle is not doing what you're doing, and they're not on what you're on, it's cage, right? It's not, you're not going to be able to grow past the people you're connected with. So anything I could do differently, it would be associate with different people, not associate with some people, and associate with other people sooner. And by other people, I mean different people. One of the best things I love about this job are all the different kinds of people that I meet. I met you, right? And there's so many different kinds of people out there. But if you don't expose yourself to that, really, you're limiting your world. And so, part of my job is even trying to help leaders say, hey, by not exposing yourself to these people, or whatever you think about them, it's really not helping you grow. You're really limiting yourself. So exposing yourself to different people that you maybe would never meet, and limiting yourself to some of the people who simply don't deserve your energy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like being stingy and being, very, very conscious as to where your energy goes is extremely important, especially at any age. But I feel like, especially in my age and people younger, where you're still, like, as you said, very impressionable. A lot of people tend to, let things fly because, as you know, when you're younger, you still haven't been, hit into the real world yet. So it's like you can get away with a lot because the consequences aren't there, and because the consequences aren't there, you can make more risky decisions, and you kind of keep on doing
Trust
that
me,
until
I understand. I got a 17-year-old son.
yeah. And so I think another thing I want to talk about too is, heading down the path that you're on, as I said, not the traditional conventional path of, your 4-year education, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I know, at least from what I've seen, kind of growing up in, I grew up, although I'm Dominican, in the Black community. All my friends are Black, Haitian, Jamaican, and everything. And then even in my own family, I've witnessed this as well. What advice would you give to someone where it's like, that they don't have the most supportive people, and where, your family always has a sly comment or something, they try to shrug over. I know personally, like when I first got licensed as a real estate agent, my grandfather, who I live with my grandparents, who would casually joke, "Oh, licenciado," the license guy, the guy with the license. But he say it jokingly, knowing that I'm actually licensed.
Yeah.
But he would like throw in sly comments like that. Have you ever experienced that? And if you have, what advice would you give to people that are in, don't have the most, or kind of in cages almost, essentially?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, and then you seek out people who aren't, you know what I mean? And you seek out certain groups and communities. That's why community, I think, is so important, at finding someone like-minded. You don't share your vision board with everyone, You don't share your vision with everyone, especially, I knew I was in the right place. Some places, this is when I was younger, I would say, well, I'm going to go do such and such so I can make $1 million. So people would laugh, ha, 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 ha. Like, what about that is fun, And then when I was going from one role to another, I remember telling, I think it was I can't remember if it was our team leader or our regional director, same person, he's been both. But I said, well, I'm going to go there and make $1 million. And he said, just one? And I was like, no, not just one. But the fact that he was like, why would you want to make $1 million? Like, that sounds, you're my kind of people. You know what I mean? I'm going to hang out with you.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily your family, and not that they don't love you. They're just, maybe you need to find other like-minded people who are like you. That's why community is so important. All these different groups and affinity groups that we have, become so important, because you need to find people who are like you, that have similar backgrounds and experiences, understand what you go through, and you can speak a common language, if you will. And that's not going to necessarily be your friends that you've been friends with for 10 years, or the best friend from middle school, or best friend from high school. That's not necessarily them. And that's okay. You don't have to cast them aside, but you do have to find a circle that understands you and supports you. So that space is really important. And just finding your tribe, if you will, is important for those reasons.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like in my case, I feel like I always, knew that I was a little bit more wise beyond my years. Early on, I think like around middle school, early high school, I knew that mentally I thought a little bit differently than everyone did. And then it wasn't until like KW. So I'm part of the Pivot Shift group with James Shaw that he runs. Mm-hmm. If you've seen how much love and support, my birthday was Friday. So literally a couple days ago from the day we're recording this live. So I just turned 21. And if you'd see Friday, the 2nd.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you. So it's super fresh though. But if you've seen the way those people blew up my Facebook, the way they blew up my phone, the way they sent cards, that's the first community that I've ever been in where I found kind of what you're talking about. People like are just, growth oriented, open minded. They all have different walks of life, but it's all for, they're all just thinking bigger and pursuing more. And it's like when they don't have limiting, and they may have limiting beliefs here and there. Everyone kind of has their own stuff, but like for the most part, it's just like, how can we all grow? How can we advance? How can we be better? How can we serve better? And I still remember when I took Bold, and I think it's like week 5 in Bold when they ask you, how much do you want to make passively, or what's your net worth or something like that. I said something like, I want net worth to be 30 million and make 2 million passively a year. And I use very conservative numbers for that, by the way. I probably could do it with less, but have you seen the way how everyone turned their heads after I had the audacity to say that? It's like 30 million. Sheesh. Like I thought I was fine with just my 5 million, but then I was on a call with my OP, and he was saying that the KW Wealth Group, they just came back from making a game plan to 50 million. I'm just like, sheesh, how big can you guys think? Because I only tripled mine.
They're not just thinking it; they're doing it.
Doing it, yeah. That's crazy, because it took me so much to move my number from just 1 million to then to move it to 30. I was like, sheesh. But then after Bold, I felt empowered enough to do that, and then I'm on another Zoom call, and it's like 50 million. Sheesh, I got to rethink my game plan, because like, why put a ceiling on myself? Why put a limiter? I genuinely feel like, we're all as you said, we're all put on this earth for a purpose. But, who's to say that, it's hard, because you kind of have to find that balance where like enough is enough. But then also, if you that you're put here for a purpose, I mean, your life mission is larger than your life, and it's more than just you. It's kind of like you're kind of stuck in a trap where it's like, you kind of have to keep on going, not for your own sake, but for the sake of everyone else that
Well,
you could
then it
potentially
becomes
help.
it's not about money at all, you know.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just not about money at all. Yeah.
And so, but it's like, it's only, you never know how much you could accomplish once it's all said and done and you take a look back. So it's like, for me, it's like, well, I might as well just keep on upping a goal, because if these other people can think it and achieve it, that means I could potentially think it and
That means
achieve
it's
it.
possible, right?
It's reality.
Even if no one in that room had, you are, there's always somebody has to be the first, right? So even if they had, and that was one of those rooms that I went and sat in because I'm like, what y'all down here talking about? 50 million? Let me see. You know, no, this room. Let me hear what you got. You know, that you just put yourself in the position. But that is your mindset. You know, that all goes back to your mindset. Like you said, some people just don't see that for themselves. And maybe being around or exposing them to other like-minded people will help them see that for themselves. But you have a very different mindset, particularly for a 21-year-old young man, which I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's a great point that you're making.
Yeah, and I think, I've been fortunate enough to find these community early on. So it's like, they always say, I think it's in the MREA book, the reason I see farther than others is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
So I don't give myself, that much credit. I'd say I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded with a lot of people that are way smarter than I am, way more experienced and knowledgeable and wise than I am. And I'm just kind of like the guy who kind of just aggregates all that wisdom. So when I spit stuff out, it sounds a lot smarter because I stole it from someone, or at least borrowed it from someone else, right? But trying to imply it into my life. Another thing I want to ask you too is, because I know your network is your net worth. How important, I know you mentioned having the people around you, how important is like one specific person, or maybe like a small group, in terms of like mentor wise? Because you have your support team with, the 5 people you surround yourself with. How important is like a mentor, coach figure in your life? Whether, I know, you just happen to be in real estate, but in general.
Well, I think, I think they used to say, like, Bill Gates has 7 coaches. Gary Keller has 7 coaches. Great leaders of the world all have a coach. Serena Williams, we all just watch, has coaches, and you can call them coaches or mentors, coaches, whatever. I think it's incredibly valuable because there's a lot of times where we can't see the blind spots, particularly in ourselves, or we become unaware. And everybody has a woe is me kind of day, So to have somebody who maybe can see it for you, when you can't see it, it's tremendously important to have somebody to do it. And plus they're focused on your actual growth, and you don't have to worry about those people in your circle who maybe aren't necessarily there, But for sure, I think everyone should have a coach. Everyone needs a coach. Coaches will help encourage you when you're down. Coaches will help see the blind spots you can't see. And generally, they have been dealing with other people who maybe have gone where you are trying to go, and they know a couple tricks that you might be able to use or employ to get there. So I think that becomes incredibly important too, just to have someone to help you, encourage you to get there, particularly as an entrepreneur. Doesn't matter what industry. As an entrepreneur, you're accountable only to yourself, and that's kind of a tricky place to be, because we will do things to ourselves we would never do to somebody else, We will do things on our own payroll we would never do on somebody else's payroll. I would never be at Macy's at the shoe store on the middle of the day because it's the last day of the sale. I just got to get them, if I was on someone else's payroll, disrespect you do to yourself, but you would never do to anybody else. But a coach kind of helps you keep, like, should you be doing those types of things, and helps keep you accountable, because we'll do things to not disappoint people that we wouldn't mind disappointing ourselves, So a coach kind of helps you in all those ways to really get to the goal, which ultimately feeds into your personal mission that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, and I think they call it like you should have a board of directors just around you, or like a cabinet around you. Yeah. What areas in life, because most people when they think of coach, is they're an athlete, it's for that particular sport, or if they're an entrepreneur, it's like for my case, a real estate coach. What other areas of life would one consider getting a coach or should get a coach in that isn't your typical, your profession or your sport or whatever?
Which certainly a financial coach, right? Especially since we're talking about walk to wealth. Who's your financial advisor? Do you have a financial advisor to tell you about all the things we don't know? Here's one of the things I know. I don't know a whole lot of stuff. I don't know a whole lot of anything. In fact, my financial advisor, I don't know what the hell he does. I just be like, does this sound good? I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. That's what I pay you for. You know what I mean? Like, you have people who are coaches in that area. He coaches me in that area as a financial coach. There's a fitness coach. We talk about health. Health is a thing. And then maybe you don't know how to eat the right things, or maybe you don't know how to do the right things to keep you healthy. Maybe you need a health coach. Maybe you need a spiritual coach. Is that your pastor, or is that, whoever that might be? Maybe you need a family life personal coach, a therapist, if you will. Maybe you need to go to therapy. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you need a coach in that area. There's so many different facets of life, financial, spiritual, health, family, that someone could help you do better in. Because there's always room to do better in those areas. And so you could have all of those people, in your circle. And then you could still associate yourself with people who are smarter, wiser, wealthier, that you can learn from as well. But it really is about those relationships. Your net worth is your net worth. And that may be people that you pay, or people that you just choose to come sit in the class when they're talking about making 50 million,
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to follow up with that is, as I said earlier, we're in the easiest time to start any business or start anything you want. One of the biggest things that you probably seen or might have seen is everyone's a guru nowadays. Everyone's a coach. Everyone has a class. Everyone has a seminar, a course, a summit, a convention, this and that. And it's kind of hard to discern who's who and who's what. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to, get a coach? What are some, traits or, I guess, credentials that you look for when you are trying to hire a coach or find a mentor, someone that may be worthwhile?
Well, for one, I would be looking for someone with a pattern and history of success. Like, I don't do theory. You know what I mean? Don't teach me theory. In theory, they should know what worked for you. What have you done? If someone has not done 10 million in sales, I don't want you talking to me about how to do 10 million in sales. One time, John, when I was married, we went to this marriage counselor, and I was like, why is this not working? I don't really know if this guy, he was accredited, he was teaching, he was a professor at the university, he was also, man had never been married in his life. How are you going to tell me about being married and you ain't never been married? That's like people giving you advice on trying to raise kids, never had kids, So is there a pattern or history of success? Have you accomplished this? Like, that's important to me. And maybe that's not the right way to do it, because maybe somebody can coach you on how to be a millionaire and they don't have a million, Maybe somebody can coach you on how to raise children. I just have found that to be true for my life.
Yeah.
I would like to see a pattern or a history of success. What have you done? Show me what you have done. And in fact, you can interview a lot of coaches. Maybe that's not, some people are better fits for other people. Do you understand my life? Do you understand my lifestyle? Do you understand who I am as a person? And the challenges that I experienced that may be unique. I know a lot of times in communities of color, people will get a coach that doesn't even understand being marginalized in the first place at all, and they have trouble connecting. Sometimes that's not an issue at all. Many times that's not an issue at all. But for some people, not understanding just even the trauma of some of the history people have gone through makes it difficult for them to be the right fit. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be the right fit, but those are some questions you might want to ask, or some things you might want to explore as far as challenges that you might have that maybe they've never experienced. Doesn't mean they can't coach you through them, because, coaching is simply asking a series of questions for you to kind of self-discover some of these things. But I personally like to see a pattern of success. Just like your clients would want to see reviews, you would want to see reviews of what they have accomplished or done in their career to be able to guide you. I don't want anybody telling me how to get to 50 million that doesn't even have 1 million. You can't tell me nothing. I don't teach anything I don't know. I don't teach theory. I'm just not an advocate for that. If I've never done it, I don't know it. I'm not going to pretend like I do and say, you know what you should do, John? What you should do is, And so that's just me personally. Other people may have certainly a different perspective, and that could be correct as well. But my perspective is I would like to see a pattern of success, a history of success that they have accomplished in what I'm trying to accomplish. Mark King, he's the president of Keller Williams. When I want to know about market center investment, market center ownership, buying property, I ask Mark. You know why I ask Mark? Because Mark has done it really, really well a whole bunch of times, So I would like him to coach me on that, not someone who's never owned a market center before.
No, definitely. I always say, because my podcast is called A Walk to Wealth, and I'm not wealthy. And I 100% agree with you. I strongly believe, and I tell this to all my friends, the blind cannot lead the blind. Don't take advice from anyone that hasn't been to where you want to be or isn't currently there. I
Well,
strongly say,
I would
but
beg to differ even about you saying that you're not currently there because that's whatever your definition of wealth might be, right? You
yeah.
seem to be very
To,
wealthy to me. You seem like a very healthy young man, very healthy young man. And you got seems like you're on your walk to 50 million to me, yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Like the things I'm learning, which is why I started the podcast. Despite that, because to my own definition, I'm not wealthy. But despite talking to these people, the things I'm learning with KW, especially, a lot of these things, it's like it's a mindset. And reading these books, like Think and Grow Rich, is one of my favorite books. And it's like I adopted the wealthy mindset. So I always tell myself, I'm rich. Just my
Yeah.
bank account doesn't show it yet. We just waiting. There's a little bit of delay. You know how you transfer money, you do a bank transfer. The bank transfer is still going through right now. It didn't connect yet, but yeah. So now that we kind of got an idea as to you have to get yourself figure out what you're connected to, or in my case, figure out what you're not connected to. Find out what your gifts are. We know that now you got to rid that cage that you're surrounded with and put the right people in place, whether that's a community, whether that's new friends, whatever that may be, a new environment. And we now know that you need someone in terms to coach you, whether it's a life coach, physical coach, health coach, entrepreneur coach, whatever it is. So now we got the pieces. Is there any final advice you could kind of give to like kind of grasp your personal mission statement to get something that moves you on the days that you're feeling down, as you said, or you're feeling tired, you don't want to get out of bed? Or how could someone craft like a really strong and powerful mission statement? Any other advice that you might have left out?
Yeah. I guess I would say just write something. What even if it first of all, even if it is just a goal, we talked about a goal not being the same thing as a mission, right? But if you don't even have goals, that's a great start right there. What do you plan to do this year? So maybe you have no idea what your life's mission is. Just the concept of that is just too big right in this very moment. Okay, how about 5 years from now? What do you want to have accomplished? Okay, how about 3? How about this year? Then we can even take this year and say, okay, well, if I'm going to do this year, what has to happen this month? Okay, let's backtrack one more. What has to happen this week in order for that to happen? Oh, how about one more time? What has to happen today? And just do that, the one thing. Because I get that life is really overwhelming sometimes. I've had a lot of very, very big challenges in my life where just accomplishing the one thing today was like, whew, got it done. And if you can accomplish one thing today that'll get you closer to your goal of next week, to next month, to next year, start there, and it will start to show up for you in your daily activities of what you're really passionate about, what's giving you the energy to get up. And then you can maybe develop that mission statement that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Okay. That's some very great advice. And as you know, when you have great conversation with people, time tends to fly pretty quickly, a lot quicker than expected. Julia, where could anyone get connected with you? Where could they reach you at? I know you're still a licensed broker. Where could people connect with you? Either if they want to buy or sell a house or invest, or maybe if they're a realtor and they're looking to get into KW, what's the best place to reach you at?
Probably on my website, which is just my name, julialashay.com. It will also take you to growwithjulia.com. Both of those places have all the classes I'm teaching, things we're into. If you want to get into real estate, I'd love to help you with that. That is my favorite thing to do, is to help people build big real estate businesses. Or if you just want to learn a little bit about whatever your question might be, you can find me at julialashay.com.
Okay, Julia, and now it's time for our favorite segment, the final 4 questions. So without further ado, what is the most impactful lesson that you learned in life?
Time is really valuable, and to spend it wisely, and that may have nothing to do with work at all. And I say that because my son died at 20, right? He never made 21. And it happened so fast. He came home from college with a pain in his leg and died 4 months later. And it was in that time that I realized that time is so valuable and so uncertain. And so whatever it is that's going to feed your soul today, don't wait till tomorrow. Do that. I've learned that. Also, that's why I can say no to a lot of things. No, because that's really not important to me. and to spend my time doing what is important to me today. Because time, we don't have a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. And people tend to take it very, very for granted.
Yes.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Character. By that I mean like integrity. Having integrity will take you a lot of places. I think that's admirable because if you have integrity, you're doing things that may not be lucrative. They may not even be popular, but you can rest assured that you feel good about your character because you've done whatever it is you're doing with integrity.
If you wanted to change someone's life with one book, what would you recommend?
The One Thing by Jay Papasan and Gary Keller, because it talks about focusing on the one thing. What's the one thing you can do? Such by doing it will make everything else easier or unnecessary. That can get you through every day, every month, every year, if you just focus on what's the one thing.
And then the final question, what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
I just want people to be better people. But I don't mean by that. I'd like to, hopefully my goal really is to be an inspiration and a motivation to other people to understand that whatever their goal is, whatever their purpose or life mission is, that they can attain it. And whatever their hardship has been, that they can attain it. I was a single mother, 18 years old, trying to get food stamps, but they made me get the money back, because I didn't have enough money, but I've done all of those things. And so really, I think that's really the mission here, is just to be an inspiration and motivation to other people to live big lives through real estate. That's my goal. That's my
Thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. Again, I am your host, John Mendez. You can find me at JohnMendez_realtor and at Walk to Wealth on Instagram. Please make sure to subscribe and leave a review if you're loving the podcast so far. New episodes are released every Sunday. Look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Take care.